Minturn is a tiny village in Dorset. Its life revolves round Minturn House, the seat of the Digby family since the 18th century. Like many of the family estates, Minturn followed a way of life which grew up hundreds of years ago. That way of life has quietly vanished in the last 40 years, and now exists only as a memory. Mr. and Mrs. Batten managed the Digby home farm in the 20s.
They were really wonderful.
Well, they treated us.
Wonderful. Well, everyone, actually.
Treated out all the employees, and we was treated all right. Well, we looked up to them and give them the place.
Well, I don't think anyone could ever say a word against them because they were so good.
Lord Digby, his wife Lady Pamela, and their family. In 1924, Lord Digby, the 11th Baron, bought a camera and started a record of estate life. The 11th Baron died in 1964. He was succeeded by his son, who now runs the Dorset estate as a modern farm. The 12th Baron was educated at Eton and Oxford and was a captain in the Coldstream Guards. He is now Vice Lieutenant of Dorset, a Justice of the Peace, and a keen farmer.
I think we are the remnants of a feudal society here. Originally, everyone was dependent on a feudal overlord. Aren't we still dependent on other people?
In a small rural community, happiness depends on good working relations.
I think the things that make for happiness are an identity of purpose, enjoying the same sort of things and feeling the same sort of achievements, which you do in the country. Every time a good crop comes up, everyone is pleased. And the harvest festival at the end of the season, this is an exciting time and everyone feels relaxed and happy.
Managing an estate means not only running machinery, but has always meant getting the best out of the estate workers.
I think the great thing is to feel that other people are interested in you and what you're doing. I always say that you can kick a man up the backside as long as you do it to his face. And if you give him a present, but do it behind his back, he won't like you. And I'm sure this is true, and certainly it's very true of my family, who have always lived here and centred their whole life on this valley.
3 miles long and 2 miles wide, the valley belongs lock, stock and barrel to the Digbys, who first settled here in 1765.
When Admiral Robert Digby first bought this estate, he visited it and wrote in his diary and said, "The estate is compact but naked. The tree is not thriving, and the house ill-contrived and ill-situated." Now, he's quickly set about rectifying this. I've got records of acorns which were put in the corner of fields, and you now see a tree 120 feet tall. Then, of course, his nephew, Admiral Henry Digby, carried it on, and his son, the 9th Baron, was a grandson of Tom Cook of Norfolk, so there was a big feeling of improvement of the land and improvement of farming. Then came my grandfather, who started the rhododendrons, which were very much improved by my father. So that what you've got here is a valley which people say, wonderful natural beauty. But in fact, of course, it's all man-made and made by a whole series of people.
Nowadays, big estates have to earn their keep. But in the previous Lord Digby's day, they really existed for the pleasure of the family. this enviable way of life stood a supporting army of retainers.
In the nursery, there was 2 nurses on the top floor and a children's maid.
Mrs. Mitchell came to Minturn in 1914 to be the wife of the odd job man.
There was the governess, of course. Then you came down to the kitchen where there was a chef. And then there was his wife afterwards. And another kitchen maid, and a scullery maid, and a between maid, a still room maid. And then there was the head gardener, and the garden foreman, and several gardeners under them. And then there was the coachman and the head groom, and all the grooms under him.
A butler, 2 footmen, hall boy, odd job man, 4 housemaids, including the head housemaid, lady's maid.
The estate carpenter, George King, first came to Minturn as a boy of 11.
Nursemaid, girl's maid, and then of course we had the laundry, 4 work in the laundry.
And all of these servants looked to Lord and Lady Digby for their livelihood.
Hilaire Belloc wrote, it is the duty of the wealthy man to provide employment for the artisan. And these estates were built up in order to employ a large amount of labour. And if people were, well, they weren't out of work in a place like this because something was found for them. In bad times, walls were built.
Going back to those days, many farmers went bankrupt, but you knew if you worked on an estate, you were safe and provide. And you was a good worker, behaved yourself and all that sort of thing. I don't think there was any fear of anything going wrong. Oh, absolute security working on an estate.
Living the other side of the hill in Cerne Abbas is Lord Digby's mother, Pamela Lady Digby.
Really, nobody ever left, you know. I would have been very surprised if anybody ever gave notice. You know, there was stability. But I think, well, it came from mutual respect and affection on each side.
Well, I think we had more respect for one another than what we have today, you know. And I think that we was more easily satisfied.
Of the 40 or so Minturn staff, only a handful remain. The Lakes, the Copps and the Curtises began work half a century ago.
We had very, very little money.
Used to walk.
Do you remember when you and I used to come in and I used to say to you, here, Gwen, I got tuppence left this week.
Yeah.
I'm well off. And I was a millionaire nearly by having... I did, true, by having tuppence left after you paid everything. I mean, like with her hire purchase, you couldn't have stuff on hire purchase because you knew jolly well you wouldn't have the money to pay it. There were 6 of us. Look, Mother and Father, there was 8 of us all together. And we'd have our, perhaps 2 slices cut for our tea. You couldn't, no good asking for any more because there was no more to be had.
No, we was like that too.
And during the First World War, I can remember very well, Baker had never come till about 11:30 one night, and my mother promised us, we all went to bed, and she promised us that if the baker come, you know, she'd bring us up some bread, and she brought it up to us that hour of the night.
Well, I've had a queue, my sister and I lived together, 3 mornings a week. We used to have 3 loaves a week for 2 of us. You couldn't have no more, it wasn't good, you couldn't have it. That was awful, they days.
Because there was 9 of us in the family. There was 5 girls and 4 boys.
And Mother and Father.
And Dad and he was a shepherd. And he used
Anybody
to
that says just the good old days, they can have them.
You wouldn't see a man sitting in an armchair like what? Oh, no, you wouldn't. You'd have an old hard stool to sit on.
And we didn't have like linen carpets on the floor, did we?
Oh, no, scrubbed.
Scrubbed floors.
Yeah. Scrub.
And scrubbed staircase.
Yes.
No stair carpets or anything like that.
No.
Running about like a head of a cabbage with patches all over it.
Well, that was right, yeah.
And in those days, you always
Well,
had dress clothes.
patch was honourable, you see.
Yes,
Some of the Sundays, well, they don't keep
Patch
any
was
for Sundays
honourable,
now, do they?
and the whole was
No,
awful.
no, they don't give anything for
I
something.
mean, we
Oh,
always did.
no.
The Digby passion for outdoor sports involved a good deal of support from their servants, like George Old, who was a woodman for 12 years, and Louis Squibb, a groom. His family were on the estate for 3 generations.
He used to like his shooting, all right. And mine down in one part of the cover, I was shooting from old Charlie Clark. We had to jump the brook. His lordship were out in the cover, just outside in the shooting ride, walking down along. You could see a lot of us all down through there. Old Charlie was running back and forward. Charlie said, I can't jump. What the hell's the matter with you, man? He said, jump. Charlie jumped right in the river. I jumped across and pulled out to the right. Charlie marched on the rest of the day, soaked to the skin. Right, his lordship was going to grumble to him again. You might get a rabbit when you finish.
You might not. All
And you might not. All kind of what sort of mood he was in.
Yeah.
He was a real general on parade when he was shooting.
Yeah, he was that.
Just make one false move. Didn't matter what part of the cover you was. He knew.
Yeah, he knew.
I think Lou can tell you about the meat when he was hunting. He had to be there at the right moment and the right time.
Yes, and that has the right horse ready, where you knew where was that one or no. You had to have them all ready. And his lordship was never late to a meet. And when he hunted the catstock hounds, he was never late moving off. He always moved off by 11 o'clock. He enjoyed his hunting and shooting.
Just make you do the work for rabbit, too.
Yes, that's a fact he did. Yeah. Miles I rode before I got to the meet. And miles I rode home at night. You had to keep your horses pretty fit to do it, too. That's how I come with that. Holding the reins, all winds and weathers. You couldn't expect much different.
The present Lord Digby and his sisters.
when I was being brought up, I remember only too well. My mother thought she was economizing very much with only 16 indoor servants. And of course the discipline and the life below stairs was much more formal than anything we would know.
Oh, well, the butler was the big man, wasn't he? The big
Mr. Butler, wasn't it?
Butler was the butler.
I can tell you.
Sir, you had to say then.
Sir, what, to the butler?
Oh, yeah.
Tell him what you used to have to do, Frank, to the butler.
Sir, that's what I used to have to say, Tom.
What did you have
Tell
to do
him
for
what
the
you
butler?
used to have to do for the butler.
Oh, you don't know what that
You know what you used to have to do, Frank.
Go on, Frank, tell him.
Oh, I mustn't say that here.
Oh, I see. As bad as
Was it
that,
like
was
that,
it?
is it?
No, I mean,
No.
they did. They always,
nothing.
they used to think they were just that bit better than everybody else,
Oh,
didn't
yeah.
they?
Of course, the elder servants, the head housemaid and the butler and that sort of thing, they had the authority over them to keep the others, you see, just right.
There was always just that much difference.
Well, there was...
The shrubbery man. Oh, yes, he was a bit...
He was a bit up.
Yes. But we were the poor little underdogs, weren't we?
Yeah.
The rock.
Well, I suppose really and truly, look, put all joking aside, they had that bit much more money than we had, and there you are. They could afford to think they were the high and mighty.
And when they used to get their uniform and all from them, and they
Yeah,
were down in
that's
the
right, but
drawer.
we didn't.
Well, see, they can't get no servants, can they? Not now, not to live in or
they
anything
won't
like
do it.
used
Not
to.
now, will they?
No.
No, they ain't going to curtsy. Yes, me lady.
No, none of that.
And, come on,
Had to be in
Lord.
8:30 at night when
Yeah.
it's your night out.
You were lucky, I'd have been at 8.
During the First World War, I had to be in at 8:30 every time I was out, yeah. Every other Sunday. Sure.
Well,
Never mind, I had a
that's what
good
happened.
time.
It was the war that
I've changed it, yeah.
it changed.
Yes.
I can remember the time going back before we came to Minton, when we was on another estate, when the girls met the lady and the girl curtsied, and the boy stood upright with his hands beside him and bowed. Now that was, you was taught to do that.
I think that class of people, in certain ways, respect you more today, in a way, than they did then. But still, they've got that instinct in them that they're the Lord and Lady of the manor.
Lord and Lady would visit the dairy, and the doorsteps would have to be whitened, and while it was wet, the crest would be stamped in the middle.
Well, I respected the man, he had his honours, I respected those honours. And why should you have to say, good morning, my lord, good evening, my lord, or afternoon, my lord in the morning and finish? And why should he call me old and I not, and I had to call him my lord? Can you tell me that?
Well, we had to respect them. That was Lord Digbys.
Lord and Lady Digby were so just and so nice. I mean, you were very pleased to be working for them. They never found fault. I don't know, of course, indoors, but they never found fault. They just hoped that you were happy, and they made things happy.
They made you happy.
I mean, you never met them without, there was always a nice, kind word, you see. Well, I think that goes such a long way, doesn't it? Really. But, and they seemed to want to help. They didn't come out, they never came out and interfered, you see. Well, I mean, these days, people seem to interfere so much, which makes things a bit more unhappy, doesn't it? But they didn't. They were so sweet, both of them, both her ladyship and his lordship. They were always addressed as that, you see. I mean, they were the lord and lady, and you gave them their place naturally, because they were so sweet.
If you've got a good employer and you're happy, I think that's all one needs. Obviously, you've got to have money to live and all the rest of it, but if you're fair to him, he'll be fair to you.
The real and truth about it, the only thing that I didn't like was the domineration. I'm not saying anything for his lordship that was then or against him. Personally, I suppose he was a gentleman. And we all accepted that. And I think the generation before that was a little bit lower than us. They accepted more.
It was a close community. Everyone knew one another for years. It was father to son again, all through the ages. Everyone got on with their job and was quite happy in doing so. When the men left off work here, a Saturday night was the ritual. They walked to Cerne, down to Mrs. Pawley's, Elephant Castle, to play bagatelle. And there they all met. And if they could win half a pint or a pint of beer off of one another, they made their day. They came back really, they had a wonderful evening. Now that was the life of those days.
I was happy in those days when I was up at Minturn as I ever was.
But I liked the old ways, you know, myself. There was a little village hall there, you know, where we used to have our whist drives and our dances and cell work and jumble cells and that sort of thing. And but in the big house they did have a dance every other Friday. That was for the staff and outside members if they cared to come.
Well, Mrs. Cheeseman, she was the organist at Minton, and she used to always play the piano. We used to have not the old-time dances, we used to have shotties and waltzes and one-steps, quick step, quadrilles and lancers. We always had to have those because, of course, they were a happy dance, really. I mean, so many was in the sets that you were all happy together. And they always had a wonderful spread laid out for us all to have, refreshments, you see. And they always said they hoped that we had a nice evening. Sometimes they used to come and look, you know, once now and again, and to be upset, to see if we were being happy.
Later on, when the cinema came in, my father used to show Charlie Chaplin films and others.
The whole family was allowed to go.
Yeah.
Let somebody come in there and cough a couple of times. Well, the old man working his box, he'd holler like, "What's that man doing there?" And there was a little kiddie that started crying, "Take him out, take him out." Then you hear somebody say, "The old man ain't in a very good mood tonight, is he?"
Good.
He was always so good with the kids.
Yeah. We used to have lovely times. We used to have a lovely Christmas tree, didn't we, you know?
Oh, yeah, parties.
At Christmas time.
When, what was Captain Eddie, Lord Digbys is now, when he was 21, we had a big party, fireworks and all
there,
that.
I was telling about that. Do you remember when we went to Lord Digbys' wedding, Mabel? That's about the best day we ever had in our life.
Yes.
We started from here about 5:30.
I know.
All in our best clothes to be friends. And Lord Digby gave us a marvellous lunch just before we got into London, wasn't it?
Yes.
It had a huge big restaurant, and we had a wash and brush up, and we went on to this lovely wedding in St Margaret's, Westminster.
Nothing to drink, only champagne.
When my son was married in London, my husband sent up an enormous sort of bus to take people from Minton. And my son was very anxious to have some from Cerne because he used to go down and buy sweets from the baker's wife, Mrs. Dubbin, etc., etc., etc. And they all went up together. They had lunch on the way. They enjoyed themselves enormously. But the Cerne people said to me, "And you know the Minton people were quite nice." And the Minton people said to me, "And you know the Cerne people were quite nice." And honestly, they haven't sort of mixed before.
And Lord Digby came out and he
Waved us all.
and he got up in the coach and he said to us, "Are we all here?"
That's right.
Didn't we?
He ran
And he
along
looked
beside
round
the
and he
coach,
ran on
waved
alongside
us
of the
all.
coach, didn't he? And waved us, you know, bye bye, bye bye. Marvellous.
And he went straight on to his club.
Yeah.
He didn't go back to the reception.
That was about the most enjoyable day I think I've had in Minton. Well, that in London.
London.
And London. I mean.
And I think those people in those days If they were hiring you, they were doing a great honour on top of the wages for hiring you. And they expected you to do a lot of it for the love of the thing. And say, oh, yes, my lord, thank you, my lord, I'll do that, my lord. But I don't come to that, I never have.
And we don't, you see, we don't do it intentionally. It's just a force of habit. It's so drilled into us over the years, going back, that one automatically does it. Well, when one's in the army, one always salutes one's officers, doesn't one?
Lord Digby was fair. He wouldn't have no hanky-panky business. If he wanted you, you had to be there at the moment and the right time. If you didn't, well, you could yearn all over the village.
Yeah.
And that's the real truth about it. He paid, but he only paid what the agricultural structure was. And didn't matter what compartment they were in. They only had the agriculture wages. And as soon as ever the wages go up, you might get a bombshell and you might sack half a dozen blokes and Bob's your uncle. You had to go on.
Well, it was funny. I was talking to my son's bailiff this morning, and he was originally our cowman down here. And he puts it all down very much to my husband, that anyone who had anything to do with him was always happy, which is perfectly true. And I think everybody loved him. I mean, we were employer and employees, I suppose, but there was really a great friendship and affection between us.
I covet no man's goods. But these kind of people those days had the money and they had the working class, and they wanted to put the working class just where everything to fit their convenience. And if they was doing that, they thought they were doing you a good turn. And you were just howled around, more or less howled around. And I resented it very much.
Well, of course, inherited responsibility and wealth don't fit in with modern ideas. But I think one loses a certain amount. Of course, I'm very vast. I've been very lucky from that point of view. But if you don't have anyone inheriting wealth and being brought up in the sort of atmosphere that I've been brought up, you won't get people with a disinterested idea of public service. I do a lot of local government work, and so has my ancestors, and I think we can say that we haven't had access to grind. We've been very well off, and therefore it wasn't necessary. And I think that to get a proportion of people who have privileges, provided they stand up to responsibilities, I personally don't think it's such a bad thing. Most people wouldn't agree with me.